All right, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to replace your fuel pump and fuel filter on your 2006 to 2010 Ford Explorer. This tutorial will work for both the V6 and the V8 models. Let's get started. Okay, so for me, safety is a huge priority. So what I'm doing is I'm using a 3-ton floor jack in the back with two 3-ton jack stands, and the same thing in the front underneath the K member. We have a 3-ton floor jack and two 3-ton stands. The vehicle is up, it's safe, and we have backup in case anything happens. Okay, so unfortunately, in order to get to the bolts to take the strap off of our fuel tank, we need to remove the rearmost portion of the drive shaft where it meets with the differential yoke. Now, in order to do that, we have a 12mm 12-point. I have a ratcheting wrench. You could use a socket with an impact. That would be a little bit easier. Now, depending on the last time or if your drive shaft was ever removed, you might need to use some MAP gas. Luckily for me, I just replaced the transmission, and so these bolts are super loose. You know, I was able to take it out without having rust binding up, but we need to remove the 4 12mm 12-point bolts, and they look like this. Okay, so with all 4 bolts removed, the next thing we can do is we can take our hammer. Now, if you want to, I never noticed much of a difference. You can take a paint marker and mark up the bolt with the yoke so you know what goes where. Again, I replaced the transmission. This is a different drive shaft, and I've never noticed any vibration issues, so I'm not gonna. But in any event, take our hammer, we tap it. Now, it is heavy, so be careful. Now we gotta push it forward a little bit and pull it down. Like so. Perfect. Now we have access to the strap bolt, which is what we needed in the first place. Okay, so here we are underneath the back side of the vehicle. As you can see, there's our rear differential. We need to undo the fuel filler neck. Now, it's a 6mm band clamp, or you could use a flat screwdriver. I undid it as much as I could and popped it over the barbed section of the fitting. Now, despite the fitting being low on the tank, there is a check valve. You will get some fuel to come out of it, so make sure you have a bucket underneath, but I'm gonna muscle it off with a flat screwdriver, pull backwards, and try to catch as much fuel as I can. Okay, so here we are underneath the front of the vehicle, and you can see our catalytic converter. There's a heat shield we need to take off. It's 3 13mm bolts. We have 1, 2, and number 3. With the shield out of the way, we have 2 10mm bolts that cover our fuel filter. We need to remove the nuts, and we'll pop that little shield off. Okay, so hidden up here, kind of flopping around, doesn't feel very proper. Someone's absolutely been in here. Is our fuel filter. Now, there's 2 clips. What needs to happen is we need to undo this clip right here because it goes up to the fuel rail and we can't drop our tank down with it still hooked up. So I'm gonna undo that one. And again, you're gonna need another drain bucket underneath because the filter does hold fuel, and everything that's left in the rail will drain backwards and down onto the ground. So get yourself a drain pan. I'm gonna undo this now. Okay, so I can actually get a pretty good camera angle here. You have these white clips right here, and all you have to do is squeeze them together and push them up towards the underside of the vehicle. That'll basically pop the clip out of the little sleeve, and we can just pull the fuel thing right off of it. So squeeze, push up, it'll undo it, and we could just pop the fitting right off. Okay, so here I am underneath the vehicle. I'm at the back right now. It's time to undo our straps. 2 15mm, one's a bolt, one's a nut. So on the back side is a bolt. I have a floor jack under the back of the tank that I'm supporting the weight with. And in the front, here is our nut, and another floor jack in the front of the tank that I'm supporting the weight with. So I'm gonna take my trusty Ooga Dugga, undo this one, and undo that one. Okay, so now extremely slowly, I'm going to start lowering the tank on the back side, then go to the front side, then go to the back side, while keeping in mind that we have to make sure none of the evap lines or the canister is getting hung up. Also, the wiring harness you have to keep an eye out for. So slowly and periodically lower the tank and look at all the connections. Okay, so on the front of the truck, The fuel tank actually sits on the transmission cross member, so there's no weight on this floor jack right now. It's just chilling on the cross member. So what we actually have to do is lower that all the way and then kind of take the whole tank and slide it backwards, and then it'll drop down. So I'm gonna lower the floor jack enough to catch the weight when it finally does go, let this down as much as I can, slide it back, and we'll have it come down. I see my first connection, it's starting to get hung up a little bit. This is a very easy connection to unhook. So basically this white piece right here, you're gonna push it in. You push it in and pull it off. I always thought you pull it out with like a flat screwdriver, but that's how you break it. It's the same connection underneath the hood that connects to the intake manifold. So again, all you do is push it and pull it off. I'm gonna try to demonstrate as best as I could. Push in, pull off, just like that. Okay, so our second vacuum line holding us up right now is this big guy. This goes above this K-member here on our chassis, and it goes to like a little evap canister right over here. Now there's no connection clip, there's no clamp, nothing. It's just the barb holding it on. So we can actually very easily just tug at this, pops right off just like that. Keep that to the side. And we just have to be mindful of this canister and that we put the hose back on when we're installing it. What I'm gonna do now is right over there is the harness that connects to the fuel pump. I'm gonna attempt to stick my arm in here and disconnect it as gingerly as possible. That way it's out of the way and it's not being tugged on. So I'm gonna try to do that now. Okay, I got the harness unplugged. You can actually unclip the main connector from the frame and pull it a couple inches towards you. That way you have some more room to work with. But that's undone, and I'm gonna continue with dropping the tank. All right, everybody, so now that we have the fuel tank out from underneath the truck, it was actually kind of a bastard to do because the green mint color thing right here was getting hung up underneath on the floor panel of the truck. You could kind of see where it was scraping. So you just got to kind of work with it a little bit. And then I got a little impatient and just Johnny Armstronged it, and it slipped right out. So you might have to put some muscle into it. Regardless, we have the tank out. Now, if you're like me, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pressure wash the entire tank. While the tank is out, I'm gonna go underneath the truck and pressure wash the entire undercarriage. You don't have to, but when you pressure wash the tank, it ensures no contaminants get down into the tank when we break the seal. So that's what I'm gonna work on now. All right, what's up guys? Next day, back on the Explorer here. I got the tank pressure washed. Everything is nice and clean, so we have a couple connections we need to undo here. First one is just this little electrical connector here, pinch and pull. But this one, basically, you have to go from underneath with a screwdriver and push a tab in on each side, and then push this red thing up. This will unclip and you can pull this off. Now I've noticed this one's very difficult to get to, but if you follow this line, it goes around to our fuel filter. So we can actually pull the fuel pump out of the tank with this still attached, and then it'll be easier for us to just take the line and kind of spin it around so we have some more access. In order to get the fuel pump out of the tank, all you have to do is take a flat screwdriver and these little lips here, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, take a hammer with a screwdriver and hit it as hard as you can. Some rust may come off. Again, I suggest getting some compressed air and blowing it out so nothing goes down into the tank. But in any event, I got this ring loosened, like so, and I'm gonna slide this off and we can pull the fuel pump out of the tank. All right guys, so I got the old fuel pump out of the truck. Unfortunately, the pump wasn't the issue for me. It was the sending unit right here. And the connections look pretty damn brittle, pretty burnt up. After it got to half a tank, I'd get no reading at all. So I got the old one out, I slipped the new one back in. Installation is reverse of removal. Okay, so I can demonstrate to you now with the fuel filter off the truck how you undo this second fitting. It's very quite simple. All you gotta do is take these two red tabs, push them in together, and push them up. It unclips like so, and all we gotta do, pull the fuel filter out. So we can go ahead, drop our pump down into the tank, make sure the O-ring is seated in the correct orientation, put our ring in, righty-tighty, we crank it to the right, and then again, I'm gonna take my hammer and my flat screwdriver, put the screwdriver right there, and tap it to lock this ring into place. Okay, so we have the main feed line that goes to the fuel pump. I have this connector plugged in here. I'm just gonna route this up underneath. Okay, so with the fuel pump now installed, our connectors on, and the one harness plugged in, we can go ahead, slip the tank back under the truck using our floor jacks and unfortunately muscle it into position. Okay, so currently I have a floor jack under the back of the tank, and in the front, I didn't even use a floor jack. I just kind of laid under the vehicle and bench pressed it, and it slid it up and over the K-member. Like I said, it's kind of convenient that the K-member holds it, so it can just sit there while you work in the back. As you can see, I have it angled. So I was able to reach up in there. I plugged the connector back in, clipped it back into the frame. And then on the back side over here, we have the two vacuum lines that we need to connect once we raise the tank and the fuel filler neck that we have to put back on. In the front, there's that barbed fitting. Don't forget about that. I was able to push that hose back up and over. So I'm going to raise the rest of the tank now as high as I can and then connect the two vacuum lines. The last thing we're gonna connect is the filler neck. All right, so with the dirty work done, we got the tank raised up all the way. The two more vacuum lines or emissions lines in the back I have connected. Now it's time we can go ahead and reinstall our straps. Now, I'm sure most of you don't have a torque wrench, but the torque spec on these are 41 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, good and tight. I'm gonna reinstall these straps, then we can take the weight off the jack and have it hang on the car again. Okay, so with our straps installed and the bolts tightened down, we can let the weight off the floor jack. And unfortunately, our next step is to reinstall the four rearmost drive shaft bolts, 12mm 12-point socket. The torque spec on these bolts are 83 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, that would be the equivalent of very good and tight. All right, guys, down to the nitty-gritty. I got a brand new fuel filter, and so on the left you have that red clip, on the right you have the white clip. I'm gonna install the fuel filter now. It's gonna be a little bit difficult for me to show you, but installation is reverse of removal, so just clip them together nice and easy, and then all we have is that heat shield and that other plastic shroud left. Okay, so now I'm going to take this extremely oily fill neck tube, pop it over the tank like so, and we got our 6mm. We're going to go nice and snug on this clamp. All right, so at this point in time, we can pray that the fuel pump we just installed actually work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle the key a few times. On, off. Off. Let's try it. All right, guys, well, that's a wrap for this video. Hope I was able to help some of you on how to replace the fuel pump on your 2002 to 2010 Ford Explorer. This is a 4th gen, this is a 2010, but the process is pretty much the same for all the Explorers between those years. Periodically, just go underneath, check for leaks. We had some air in the system that we had to bleed out. The car was shaking a little bit, but it came back. Everything is good. The fuel gauge is working. The car sounds great. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and stay tuned for the next one. Peace.